Hello again, and welcome back to Educator.com's Advanced PHP with MySQL course. In today's lesson, we're going to be covering the topic of writing to files. Our lesson is going to start with a review of how file I/O works and the steps that are involved in that, and we had gone over that previously in our lesson that introduced us to reading from files. We're going to go over a key method called fwrite, which is a method that's built into PHP that allows us to write data to files. And then we're going to talk about different access modes that you can use with the fopen function to basically open a file for writing in different ways, and we're going to learn about that. So basically we learned in our lecture on reading from files that when you perform I/O on a file, it basically has three steps. You open the file, you perform your read or write operations, and then you close the file. So for writing the files, our steps are we're going to open the file, and then we're going to perform write operations on it, and then we're going to close the file. This step is obviously going to differ because now instead of reading, we're going to be writing to the file. The third step is still going to be the same though. It's actually just going to be use the fclose method to close an open file. Step one will be a little different, and that's because we're going to have to pass a different access mode parameter to the fopen method in order to be able to write to files. Basically, in order to open a file for writing, it requires a different access mode specifier than what we had used in our reading examples, which was just the lowercase r letter. So before we talk more about the access modes, I want to talk about the fwrite function. Basically, the fwrite function is used to write the contents of a string to an open file, and a file that's opened with an access mode that allows it to be written to. It basically takes a file handle to an open file as one of its parameters, and then it basically, as a second parameter, it takes a string, and wherever the file pointer is for that currently open file, it's going to write the contents of that string wherever that file pointer is currently located at. If it's successful, it returns the number of bytes it was able to write, and if an error occurs, it returns false. One thing to note is that you may also see the function fputs used, and basically that's an alias of fwrite. It does the same exact thing. In this course, we're just going to use the fwrite method. And so before we have a slide where we're going to talk about the access modes, but just to get us started with using fwrite, basically to open an existing file for reading or writing, and this is going to open the file. Basically, we use the r plus access mode specifier. What that's going to do is allow us to open a file for reading and writing, which is what the plus sign comes from, and it's going to place the file pointer at the beginning of the file. So if we go and take a look at a script that we've written for this lecture called fwrite.php, basically what we've done is we define a string to a text file, to a data text file that we want to write to. In this case, it's located in the data subdirectory of where this script is located, and it's going to be called data.txt. And then we're going to define a string or create a string that we want to write to the file. In this case, we're going to be creating a string that says file is written to at, and it's going to use the date function to just basically dynamically generate a date, and then output a new line character. So what's going to happen is when we write this string to the file, it's going to output file written to at with the date, and then it's going to add a new line. So it's going to put the file pointer at the next beginning of the next line. And the reason I've gone ahead and used that date function is so that we can see how the values are, rather than using a static value, we can see that each time we write, it's going to actually write a different value. So then what we do is we use our fopen method as we had before for reading a file, except now we're using this r plus modifier, which basically, again, opens the file for reading or writing, and it places the file pointer at the beginning of the file. And then we simply use the fwrite method that we just learned about. We pass it the file handle to this open file, and then we pass it this string variable, which has this date string up here, and we check the result written, and written, if it was successful, written is going to contain the number of bytes that were written. If it's unsuccessful, it's going to have return false. And so we have a little error checking down here that says that it'll output the number of bytes written if it was successful. Otherwise, it'll say there was an error writing to the file. And then down here, you can see we have our fclose method, which is what we use to close a file. And so that's actually the same exact function call we had used before. So let's go take a look at trying to load this file. So here if we load fwrite.php, And we can see, also, just so you know, that we have a blank file called data.txt that's in this data directory of the lecture 7 directory. So it's in the it's a subdirectory of where the fwrite.php file is. Right now it's a blank file. And if we go ahead and run the function, or run the script fwrite.php, it's going to say 41 bytes were successfully written to the file, and it has a link that we've created down here to view the text file. And when we view data.txt, we can see the file was written to at 4:26 and 1 second on August 5th, 2011. So you can see how we were able to open up the file and write to it, and we wrote from the beginning of the file. Now, as mentioned, one thing that you can use an alternative to using fwrite that you might see is fputs. So we actually can use the fputs method as well, and it's going to do the same thing. So if we note the time of the file, 4:26:01, and we go ahead and basically refresh this page, which is going to write again to that file, and we view the text file again, now it's 4:26 and 48 seconds. So it's actually gone ahead and updated it. Fputs work the same way. Now, one thing to note is, as you can see, is that this file only has one line. Even though we've written to it twice, we've written to the same file, because what happens is the fwrite function, basically it writes its output to wherever the current file pointer is on the file handle that you pass to it. In this case, when we open the file using the r+ access modifier, the file pointer is always at the beginning. So in this case, we're always going to output our date string at the very beginning of the file, and in this case, it's just going to overwrite the last one. And one of the ways you can see that is if we go ahead and change our string. So right now our data.txt file has this line here, file written to at 4:26 and 48 seconds. Now if we change our string that we're going to write and just have some static string, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, a 4-character string, we're going to see how that fwrite basically just overwrites whatever characters are at the current position of the file pointer. So for example, when we call this, after we open the file, the r+ access modifier is going to put the file pointer at the beginning of the file. When we call fputs or fwrite to write this 4-character string, it's just going to overwrite the first 4 characters in that file. So for example, if we go ahead, we reload this page again, now it's going to say 4 bytes are written to the file, meaning because the string is only a length 4, and if we view our data file, we can see that basically what it did was overwrite the first 4 letters of the text file previously, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's something just to note about how the way fwrite and fputs work. One other thing to notice is that with the r+ modifier, you're going to get an error if you try to open a file that doesn't exist. So for example, this file data1.txt doesn't exist. So when we try to write to it, if we reload the script, we're going to get an error saying you're trying to open a file that doesn't exist. And so the r+ method, when you use the r+ access modifier, it won't create a file automatically. We're going to see in a minute that using other access modifiers will allow a file to be created automatically if it's not available when you try to open it. So let's take a look at the different access modes available to fopen. A subset of the different access mode modifiers, and these are the ones that we're going to use in this course, primarily is the A access modifier, and basically that's a modifier that says it opens the file in append mode. Basically what it says is it opens the file for writing only, and you place the file pointer at the end of the file. So if you have a file that already contains information in it, it's going to add whatever the next fwrite you perform on that file, it's going to add it to the end of the file. One thing to note about this method is that we'll actually attempt to create the file if that file does not exist. An alternate version of the append one is A+, and that allows you to read or write from a file, but as far as opening the file, it does the same thing. It places the file pointer at the end of the file, and it will attempt to create the file. So we actually have a script called appendmode.php. It's going to attempt to open a new data file called dataappend.txt. It's going to write the same string to it as we had done before. It's this dynamically generated date string. the difference here is that when we call fopen, we specify the A access mode, which is going to say append it at the beginning. Basically, is saying put the file pointer at the end of the file. And then when we go ahead and write our string, it's going to write at the current location of the file pointer, which when we first open it is at the end of the file. So actually, if we were to call the script multiple times, every time we call it, the file pointer is going to be moved to the end, and it's going to write out this, this string up here. So we're actually going to get multiple lines in the file. And down here, this is the same sort of output message that we had before. So if we actually look at our data directory, we can see that there's no data append.txt file. If we go ahead and run this script, appendmode.php, we're going to say that 41 bytes were successfully written in the file. And if we look back at data, we can see that it actually had created the file, which we had mentioned. The append mode will do that. And actually, if we go and open this file, we can see, well, actually, you can do it in the web browser. If we view it, we can see that the file was written to at 4:31 and 27 seconds. Now, because it opens it in append mode, it sets the file pointer at the beginning. If we run the script again, it's going to add a new line that contains a new date. So if we go ahead and refresh the page, and actually I'm going to do it a couple of times, on each refresh it's going to open the file and write a string to it. Now if we click View Data Append Text again, you can see that multiple lines were added to it because they've appended it to the end of the file. Sort of a alternative to that, to writing a file, is kind of what's known as the overwrite access mode, which is specified by W. The W access mode says open the file for writing only, put the file pointer at the beginning of the file, and erase all of the contents of the file. And it will also attempt to create a file if it doesn't exist. There's also the W plus access mode specifier, which allows you to does the same thing as W, except it also allows you to read from that file. So if we go and look at a script called overwritemode.php, we can see that we're going to try to open a file called dataoverwrite.txt. And again, this using the W access mode will create the file if it doesn't exist. And if we look at our data file, our data folder, we can see that that data file does not exist. We're going to try to write the same dynamic string to the file. Here, when we call fopen, we use the W access mode, which is it says overwrite, open in overwrite mode, and write only. So basically what it's going to do is any contents that are in the file, it's going to truncate or get rid of them, and then it's going to place the file pointer at the beginning. So when we call this fwrite method to write our date string on this file opened using the W mode, it's just going to write it at the first line of the file because it's going to delete all the contents. So if we go and run this script, overwritemode.php, it's going to say 41 bytes were successfully written, and we can actually see that data overwrite text exists because it created it. And we can see that it was, for example, in this case, this date string was created at 4 hours, 33 minutes, and 44 seconds. So 4:33:34. Let's remember that. Now if we go ahead and refresh the page again and view data overwrite text, it's advanced. It was 4:33:44, I think, before. Now it's been advanced. And what you can see is that instead of appending this to the end of the file like we did when we opened the file in append mode, it actually overwrit the whole file and just wrote out that one particular, the new date string. So every time in this case that we run this, it's actually going to overwrite the whole file and add a new date string. So if we were to do it again, refresh it, we'd get a new date and time string. Now, one thing to note about these, all of these methods that actually will create a file for you if it doesn't exist, is that it's required that if you try to create a file, that the data, the directory that you're trying to create the file in actually exists. So that is one requirement. The file doesn't have to exist, but the directory does. So, for example, let's say in our overwritemode.php file, instead of creating dataoverwrite.txt, in the data directory, we're going to create it in the data1 directory. And what's going to happen is when we load the script now, we're going to get an error saying that it couldn't open, basically it's saying that it couldn't create that file because that directory does not exist. So that's something that you should pay attention to. And it's just something you have to watch out for, those methods that allow you to create files. So for the homework challenge for this lesson, I basically want you to create a script that's going to open a file called data.txt, and I want you to open the file using fopen with the A access mode. So as we just learned, that actually means that the file doesn't actually have to already be created. And then, and actually I'd like you to set up so that it's not already created. And then I want you to write any random 10-character string to the file by a new line, followed by a new line. So open the file, write a 10-character string to it, close the file. Now run this script several times, and because this is in append mode, that string is going to be written multiple times to that particular file. So if you run it a few times, you'll have a couple of lines all with that 10-character string. Now I want you to alter the script so that when it opens the file, it uses the W access mode, and run the script again. Now when you run it, it's going to actually delete all the contents of the file, rewrite that one string, and even if you refresh the page over and over, it's still just going to write that one string, because every time that every time that script is run, it deletes all the contents of that file. Then I want you to modify the script so that the string you're going to be writing is only 5 characters long. It's still going to opening that data.txt file that we've been using. Don't append a new line to it as we had in the string up here. And then open the file in R+ access mode. And again, that's going to open the file for reading and writing at the beginning of the file. And then go ahead and write this 5-character string to the file, close the file, and basically run the script. And when you run the script and look at the file, look at the contents of the file, you should see that all that it's done is overwritten the first 5 characters in the file. Because in step 3 and 4, we overwrote the file to delete it, and we just added one line to it, a 10-character string. As we learned in this lesson, the fwrite method just overwrites whatever characters it needs to wherever the current file pointer is. And because the R+ access mode opens a file and places the file pointer at the beginning, it's going to overwrite the first 5 characters. So for example, if you had the numbers 1 through 10, for example, or 0 through 9, and that was your 10-character string, and then you wanted to overwrite the first 5 with just 5 X's, for example. If you did that here, you'd end up with 5 X's followed by the digits 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And so that'll give you practice with some of the different file modes used for writing to files. So that ends today's lesson. Thank you for watching Educator.com, and look forward to seeing you next time.